Hi, welcome back to Revenge Fire. This story takes place in Austin, Texas. My name is Claire Merritt. I'm 31, a licensed occupational therapist, and the kind of person who color codes her monthly budget in a spreadsheet she actually checks. So, when my younger sister called me from a gas station in Tulsa on a Tuesday afternoon, voice cracking, saying her landlord had changed the locks and she had nowhere to go, I didn't pause long enough to think it through. I just said yes. Come here. We'll figure it out. She arrived 3 days later with her husband and their two-year-old son, Dominic. Just for a few weeks, she'd said. Until we find something stable. That was 4 months ago. And last Thursday, I opened my banking app to check a charge I didn't recognize and found $11,200 gone. Not missing. Not a bank error. Gone. Spent. In my name. On things I never touched. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, just staring at the screen. Not crying. Not yelling. Just very, very still. Let me back up. My sister's name is Natalie. She's 28, 3 years younger than me, and she has always been the one our parents described as a free spirit, which was their gentle way of saying she made decisions the way other people threw darts with her eyes closed, and a lot of hope that something would stick. Her husband, Marcus, was between jobs when they showed up, which I learned meant he had quit his last two positions and hadn't actively looked for anything new in almost 5 months. Dominic, their son from Natalie's relationship before Marcus, had just aged out of a community college program he never finished and was, in his own words, figuring out his next move. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of Austin. It's not large, it's not fancy, but it's mine. And I have kept it mine through 7 years of student loan payments, one significant pay cut when I switched clinics, and the kind of careful, grinding financial discipline that nobody talks about at family dinners, because it's not interesting enough. When they moved in, I gave Natalie and Marcus the second bedroom and set Dominic up on the pullout in the living room. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself family showed up for each other. I told myself I had enough room. Enough income. Enough grace. What I had enough of, it turned out, was a willingness to believe people when they said they were trying. The first month was manageable. I bought extra groceries. The power bill went up. Natalie kept saying she was applying for jobs online, and I believed her because I could hear her typing sometimes in the other room. Marcus talked constantly about a contact he had in property management who was going to get him in somewhere good, any day now. Dominic slept until noon, watched things on his phone with the volume up, and left dishes in the sink every single morning. I let it go. I told myself they were adjusting. I told myself I remembered what it felt like to be overwhelmed and directionless, and just needing someone to hold still long enough for you to catch your breath. What I didn't tell myself, because I wasn't ready to look at it directly, was that nobody was catching their breath. They were settling in. The grocery bill doubled. The electricity bill climbed to a number I hadn't seen since my AC unit broke in a summer heat wave. There were delivery bags piling up by the front door that I hadn't ordered. A streaming service I didn't subscribe to started showing up on my bank statement under a familiar home IP address. Little charges. $5 here, $12 there. The kind of thing you almost miss if you're tired enough and trusting enough, and telling yourself it's temporary often enough. I was all three. Now here's the part I need to explain, because I've already imagined the questions. Why did they have access to your accounts? The honest answer is that I made it easy without meaning to. When they first arrived, I added Natalie to a grocery delivery account so she could handle shopping while I was at work. I let Marcus use a shared card I kept for household expenses, a secondary card on my main account, because it seemed practical while we were combining the grocery runs. Dominic used the Amazon account because I'd already saved my payment info, and when he asked to order something, he said he'd pay me back in cash. He never did. And somewhere between week 2 and week 10, the access I'd handed over piece by piece became invisible pipelines I'd stopped thinking about. That's how $11,200 left my account, without me watching it go. When I finally sorted through the transactions, the picture was almost absurd in how bold it was. 2 round-trip flights to Las Vegas for a bachelor party Dominic had mentioned once in passing. A hotel booking for 3 nights under my credit card that I'd never seen a confirmation for. A furniture set, a gaming chair and a desk, shipped to my address that was currently sitting in the corner of the living room, still in the box. Spa appointments. Concert tickets for a show happening next month. A Sephora order, a whiskey subscription box. An online course for something called luxury brand marketing that cost $890 and had never been opened. And on top of all of it, 3 weeks of grocery delivery orders that were significantly larger than what 4 people actually needed, with enough specialty items and premium cuts that I could only assume they'd started treating the account like a personal chef service. I sat with all of it for 2 hours. I built a spreadsheet, the way I do when something needs to be real, before I can respond to it. Every charge, every date, every amount, cross-referenced against my own calendar to confirm that none of it was mine. By midnight, the total sat at $11,200. Not rounded, not estimated. Exact. I thought about waking Natalie up right then. I thought about walking into the living room and turning on the lights and putting the phone in front of Dominic's face. But I'd seen what happened when people felt cornered before they felt accountable. They performed outrage. They cried in ways that were designed to redirect the conversation. They made the person with the grievance feel like the problem was their tone, not the thing that had caused it. So I didn't wake anyone up. I opened my laptop. I started with the bank. I called the after-hours fraud line and reported every charge I hadn't authorized, which was most of them. I flagged the grocery account and removed Natalie's access. I canceled the secondary card Marcus had been using and requested a new one to be sent to a different address. I went through Amazon order by order and began return requests on everything that was still eligible. I logged out every device from the streaming accounts, changed the passwords, and turned on 2-factor authentication for everything. The concert tickets were trickier. I spent 40 minutes on a chat with customer service, explaining that the card used had been compromised, that the purchases were not authorized, that I was the card holder. By the time I closed the laptop, it was almost 2:30 the morning, and I hadn't recovered everything. But I had stopped it. I washed my face, set my alarm, and lay in the dark listening to the sound of Dominic's TV through the wall. I didn't feel guilty. That surprised me a little. I thought I might. I'd spent 4 months feeling guilty about everything, about asking them to keep the kitchen cleaner, about mentioning that the delivery orders were adding up, about suggesting once that maybe Marcus could look at driving for a rideshare app just to bring in something while he waited for the property management contact to come through. But lying there at 2:30 the morning, I felt something closer to clarity. Not peace, exactly, but the particular steadiness that comes when you stop pretending a situation is going to fix itself and start actually fixing it. I got up at 6:15. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table and waited. Natalie came out first. She was in her robe, phone in hand, frowning at the screen the way you do when an app is loading slowly. She tapped it twice, then looked up at me. "Hey, the grocery account is saying my access was removed. Did something happen?" "I removed it," I said. She laughed. The short, reflexive kind. "Why? Did I do something wrong?" I set my mug down. "Open your banking app. Look at the charges on the household card going back 3 months. Her face shifted. She looked back at her phone, slower now. "What are you talking about?" Before she could keep going, Marcus appeared in the hallway, already annoyed. He was holding his own phone up like it was evidence of something I had done to him. "Claire, the card got declined. I was trying to place an order, and it's saying the payment method is invalid. Did the bank do something?" "I canceled it," I said. He stared at me. "You canceled it? Without telling me?" "I canceled it," I said again, after I spent last night going through $11,200 in charges that I didn't make. The room went the specific kind of quiet that only happens when everyone knows exactly what you're talking about. Dominic appeared a few minutes later, still in his pajamas, hair flattened on one side from sleep. He stopped when he saw the 3 of us at the table, and did a quick, practiced scan of the room, the way people do when they're trying to assess whether a situation involves them. "The Amazon account is locked," he said, almost casually. "I was trying to track an order." "What order?" I asked. He hesitated. Just some stuff. Sit down, I said. He pulled out a chair slowly. The way a teenager does, when they're trying to signal that sitting down is something they're choosing to do voluntarily and not because they were told. I pulled out my laptop and turned the screen so they could all see the spreadsheet. I walked through it line by line. The flights, the hotel, the furniture, the spa, the concert tickets, the subscription boxes, the grocery runs that cost more than my car payment. I didn't editorialize. I just read the amounts and dates and categories. When I finished, no one spoke for a moment. Then Natalie said, quietly, "Some of that was for the house. We were trying to help." I looked at her. The whiskey subscription was for the house? The groceries were, she said. We needed to eat. Natalie, I said. The grocery orders from this account averaged $340 a week. I was spending $180 before you got here. Someone was ordering Wagyu beef and imported cheese and cold brew concentrate on my card. Marcus exhaled through his nose. You're acting like we just robbed you. We've been living here. Things cost money. You're right, I said. Things cost money. That's actually the point. Dominic leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. The flights were for Brandon's bachelor party. I was going to pay you back when I got my tax return. Your tax return, I said. Yeah, from last year. I'm still waiting on it. Dominic, I said carefully, you spent $1,400 on flights to Las Vegas and a hotel room on my credit card, and your plan to pay me back was a tax return you're still waiting on from the previous fiscal year. He shrugged one shoulder. It wasn't a big deal. You have good credit. It wasn't going to hurt you. I felt something tighten in my chest, and then release. Not anger exactly, something past anger, something very quiet and very final. I'm going to tell you what's happening, I said, and I need all three of you to actually hear it. I straightened up. I'd printed the bank statement the night before the full 3 months, and I slid it to the center of the table. I have been covering the mortgage on this apartment, all utilities, the bulk of the food, the streaming accounts, and the miscellaneous charges that have been accumulating since you moved in. In 4 months, I have spent or had spent from my accounts roughly $19,000 more than I would have spent living alone. $11,200 of that was spent without my knowledge or permission. Natalie opened her mouth. I kept going. I work 40 hours a week as an OT. I have student loans. I have a car that needs new tires. I have a savings account I've been building for 3 years toward a down payment, and that account has not grown by a single dollar since February because every extra cent I have has been going into this apartment. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. We appreciate everything you've done. We do. But locking us out of everything without even talking to us first? That feels like an attack. Spending $11,200 from my accounts without asking feels like an attack, I said. What I did last night was a response. Natalie's eyes were wet. I didn't know it was that much. I didn't know Dominic was using it for all of that. Did you know he was using it? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. I thought he was just ordering things here and there. Here and there, I said. Dominic rolled his eyes. Can we stop acting like I'm some kind of criminal? It wasn't like I was out there scamming strangers. It was family. I thought it was fine. You thought charging $890 to my card for a course you never opened was fine, I said. I was going to use it, he said. You haven't opened it once, I said. I checked the account. Not once. He opened his mouth and then closed it. I folded my hands on the table. Here is what is going to happen. Every account that any of you had access to has been closed, frozen, or had its credentials changed. That is not going to be reversed. I have filed disputes with the bank for the unauthorized charges, and I am in the process of requesting returns on everything eligible. I am not asking for permission to do any of this. It's already done. Natalie wiped her eyes. So what does that mean for us? For living here? That's the second part, I said. You can stay. But things are changing. Starting today. I told them. No more shared cards, accounts, apps, or logins. Period. Their food was their responsibility. If they wanted to be on a delivery account, they opened their own with their own payment method. If they wanted to stream something, they paid for it. And every adult in this apartment who was not currently employed needed to be actively, demonstrably working toward employment. Not talking about it, not waiting for the right thing to come along. Working toward it, applications sent, interviews scheduled, income coming in from somewhere. I gave them 2 weeks. 2 weeks to show me movement. Real movement. Marcus bristled. 2 weeks isn't enough time to find a real job. There are real jobs that will hire you within 48 hours, I said. Warehouse work, delivery driving, service jobs, stocking shifts. They are not the jobs you want. They are the jobs that pay your portion of what you owe me. So you want us to work fast food, Dominic said flatly. I want you to work, I said. Whatever that looks like. Natalie reached across the table and put her hand over mine. We're going to fix this. I promise. I looked at her. She had the same eyes she'd had when we were kids, when she used to promise things she couldn't keep and mean it completely in the moment. I wanted to believe her. I always wanted to believe her. I hope so, I said. I really do. That afternoon, while they were quiet in their rooms, I drove to 2 of the stores where Dominic's purchases had been delivered. The gaming desk was still in its box. The chair was still wrapped in its factory plastic. I loaded both into my car with the packing slips and drove to the nearest location of the store he'd ordered from. The customer service rep checked the order number, verified my card information, and processed the return without drama. The refund hit my account before I got home. I did the same with the unopened course subscription. A 40-minute call with customer support, a patient explanation that the card had been used without authorization, a request to escalate to their billing dispute team. They reversed the charge. By the end of the week, I'd recovered just over $6,000 through returns and bank disputes. Not everything. The flights were non-refundable. Some of the food orders were long gone, but enough to feel like I wasn't completely underwater. On day 5, Natalie got a part-time job at a coffee shop 2 miles from the apartment. She came home with her schedule written on a napkin and looked at me with something between pride and apology. I told her I was glad. Marcus spent 3 days telling me he had leads before I found out from Natalie that he'd been spending those days playing video games in their room. On day 6, I sat down with him at the kitchen table and opened a browser. I pulled up a list of logistics companies hiring in the Austin metro and walked him through the application for the first one. He filled it out while I sat there. Not because I was hovering, because I'd learned that left to his own devices, I'll do it later meant something different to him than it did to me. Dominic was the hardest. He spent the first week being furious in the passive way that young men sometimes are, not yelling, just sighing loudly and slamming cabinets and making every room he entered feel slightly colder. On day 8, he told me that what I'd done was humiliating and that I'd treated him like a thief. I looked at him. You spent money from my account without asking. What would you call that? He stared at the floor. I'm not trying to humiliate you, I said. I'm trying to make this stop. There's a difference. He applied for a job at a hardware store the next day. I don't know if it was because of that conversation or despite it. By day 12, he had an interview scheduled. But by day 13, Marcus had already given up on the logistics application, claiming the job had too many requirements, and had gone back to waiting for his property management contact. Natalie was picking up shifts, but spending most of what she earned on things for herself, which was her right, but she'd made no mention of contributing to the utilities or the groceries or the $11,200 that still sat between us like a crack in the floor. On day 14, I set the printed letter on the kitchen table before they woke up. It was 1 page. It said that the 2 weeks had passed, that I had seen effort from some of them and not from others, and that the situation as it currently stood was not sustainable. It outlined the debt, what had been recovered, what was still outstanding, and what I was prepared to do about it legally if we couldn't reach an agreement. It said that, unless there was a concrete repayment plan in writing, by the following Friday, I would begin the formal process of asking them to vacate, with proper notice as required under Texas law. I poured my coffee and sat at the table when they came out. Natalie read it first. Her face went through 3 or 4 different expressions before she set it down. Claire, she said. This is a legal letter. It's a practical one, I said. Marcus read it next, jaw tightening with every paragraph. You'd actually take us to court? We're family. I'd rather not, I said. That's why the letter exists. Dominic read it last. He slid it back across the table without a word. That afternoon, something shifted. Natalie called me from her break at the coffee shop and asked if I'd be willing to sit down with her and Marcus that night and work out a real number, a real timeline. I said yes. We sat at the table for 2 hours. By the end, we had a document informal, but written, and signed by all three of them outlining a repayment schedule over 18 months, starting with what Natalie and Dominic were currently earning. It wasn't everything. It wasn't fast. But it was real. And it was theirs. And they had agreed to it in writing. Marcus got a call back from the logistics company 3 days later. He took it. They were out of my apartment 6 weeks after that, not because I forced them, but because with 2 incomes and Dominic's new part-time hours, they were able to cover first month and deposit on a small rental in Pflugerville. The day they moved out, Natalie hugged me in the doorway for a long time without saying anything. I hugged her back. When the door closed and the apartment was quiet, I sat down on my couch and didn't move for 20 minutes. Not because I was sad, because I had forgotten what my own silence sounded like. Over the following months, the bank disputes resolved. Between the chargebacks, the returns, and the first few payments on the repayment plan, I had recovered just under $9,000. The rest was still on the schedule. Some of it, I was honest with myself, I might never see. But I had stopped the hemorrhage. I had my apartment back. I could hear myself think again. One evening, I was sitting on my porch with a cup of tea when Natalie texted me a photo. It was her, Marcus, and Dominic standing in front of a small beige house. Dominic holding a set of keys. Everyone squinting into the sun. She'd written under it, "We found a place. A real one. Thank you for not giving up on us." I stared at the photo for a while. I thought about the parking lot in Tulsa, the crack in her voice, the way I'd said yes without pausing. I didn't regret saying yes. I regretted saying nothing for 4 months, while the yes slowly became something else entirely. I texted back, "I'm proud of you. Keep the repayment schedule." She sent a heart. I put my phone face down and went back to my tea. People talk about family like it's a reason to absorb anything. Like the word itself is a kind of instruction to hold still while someone uses you up. But I've spent enough time in clinical settings watching people confuse endurance with love to know that they're not the same thing. Endurance without a limit isn't devotion, it's just delayed damage. What I know now, sitting in my quiet apartment with a budget that's finally climbing back toward where it was, is this. The most useful thing I did for my sister wasn't giving her a couch to land on. It was being honest enough to stop pretending the landing could go on forever. If you're in a situation right now where someone is treating your generosity like a subscription they didn't have to pay for, where every time you try to say something you get told you're overreacting, where you've been so deep in trying to hold it together for everyone that you've stopped asking whether anyone is holding it together for you, I want you to hear this directly. You are allowed to lock the door. You are allowed to cancel the card. You are allowed to put a number on paper and say, "This is what was taken, and this is what has to happen next." Protecting yourself is not the opposite of loving someone. Sometimes it is the only version of love that actually requires anything of them. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's the thing that finally makes them stand up,